don't even know why I'm, like, going on my way for this stuff. It's just fun, too. I definitely don't plan to 100% this game on stream. But maybe I could on my own time at some point. I do like doing that sometimes, where, like, I kind of get, like, a second life out of a game by beating it, like, walking away from it for a really long time, and then coming back to it later for the sake of doing everything else in it. I think my best memory of a game that was, like, really good for that kind of thing was, when Majora's Mask got re-released for the 3DS, where, like, when I first got it, I just kind of played through the, game as normal, and then I picked it up way later and was like, time to do all the masks, and it was, like, practically a second game, because of how much, like, awesome side content there is in that game. But in general, with platformers, it works really well for just 100%ing them, you know? Because that can be a lot of extra, hopefully fun digging into games, although I know for a fact that this game has some, rough 100%ing stuff to do. Banjo-Tooie was probably the biggest game that I can think of like that, where I think I maybe experienced like 30% of that game by just beating it normally all the way through. And for better or worse, that game is a lot more than that. Recently started PNG tubing too? Oh, nice. Do you have like a general, you know, game plan for streaming, or are you basically doing what I do, which is that you're just kind of playing games that you like because you want to show them off a little bit? A mix of both. I met most of my community through Overwatch, so that's a big staple. But I also like the mix in. Yeah, no, that's cool. That sounds like it's kind of like the almost an opposite of how I've kind of gone about it, where I do really like doing the fighting game streams, but I only do them like from time to time. And it definitely feels like it's like a segmented part of the people who tune in to watch me. Like, not that literally none of my non-fighting game people will tune in for the fighting games, but it's like when I play fighting games, there's some names that I definitely only see when I'm playing them. And that's kind of fun for its own reasons. Even if I feel a little bad that the non-fighting game people are like, well, probably not gonna know what's going on here. Maybe I'll tune in for a bit. Not that I blame anybody, I'm not usually the, not the best at focusing on stuff like at least more competitive stuff when it's something I'm, like, not into on some level. Fighting games are at least fun to watch even when you don't entirely know what's going on. That's totally fair. Especially with an anime fighter where everything is, like, insanely flashy and stuff. And, I try to at least kind of sort of give context to things as I go on, but I'm sure I'm using some terminology that not everybody is kind of privy to, and maybe not helping as much as I think I am. But also, yeah, I mean, the health bars make it pretty obvious what's going on. It's, you know, a pretty basic concept at its core. I feel like that's honestly half of what drew me to playing fighting games in the first place, is that you can kind of see everything at once. Even if you don't, like, totally understand all of the more confusing concepts. Unlike something like a shooter, or especially a MOBA, where if you don't, like, really know your way around everything, it's hard to have a sense of, like, what's where and why things are happening. MOBAs, especially from a spectator standpoint. It almost amazes me that they're so popular, because they're, like, so hard to understand unless you're really, like... Unless you've at least played them. But then again, I guess a lot of people have played them. Oh! Oh! Wait, hold on. Get me into the light. Well, I found the me color. So that's nice. Now I just have to track down a blue shirt. Did I literally find... That's so fucked up. You know, for all intents and purposes, the blue sweater works. Man, that's so fucked up. Tyler? Oh no, you can get hair. That means that there's a non-zero chance that I can find hair that kind of looks like me too. Oh! That's cute. Now I am just Conker. I feel like half the time when I see a video of this game online, it's people using this combination, probably to look like Conker. Which, you know what? Fair enough. Now you're playing almost Conker? I could play actually Conker. Let's see. There we go. Oh, the actual Conker game I didn't play until, like, somewhat recently. Which was kind of funny. It was mostly like me and my partner were just talking about the game. And they were like, what the hell do you mean you haven't played? That's like the Squirrel game. I did technically grow up around the game, but it was definitely at a time where I was like still young enough that I was like, this game is a little too naughty for me. Which was mostly funny because the neighbor that I had it was younger than me, but was also, like, ridiculous when it came to, like, swearing and playing and watching stuff like that. And it always made little kid me pretty uncomfortable, but also he was, like, the only other person in the neighborhood that played video games, so we hung out together. I'm loving the itty-bitty squirrel, yeah. For how, like, actually goofy this game obviously is, like, with a lot of, like, the animation work and stuff being pretty shitposty. I feel like this game actually does a pretty solid job of, like, making you feel pretty squirrely. Like, the animations of just, like, walking around and stuff are great. Being able to, like, cling onto trees and onto, like, wires and stuff. It just actually feels pretty fun and, like, I don't know. The game's pretty well built around it. Also, this joke never gets old. So the art style of this game is great. I really love that they do the thick outline thing. Very cute, reminds me of Paper Mario. Yeah, it's very, like, Game Boy Advance coded, which I feel like is pretty uncommon with indie games, but has kind of got, you know, as time goes on, we're getting more of, like, the retro throwback to X amount of years back, so we're getting a lot more, like, GameCube-y, GBA style stuff nowadays, because that's what, like, a lot of people making games grew up with. So it goes. This looks like one of those random GBA ROMs. I played my dad's old computer as a kid. It does have that energy, in a very positive way. Where you're like, wow, I never would have played this game if it wasn't for emulation. Thanks, emulation. I haven't decided if I'm gonna 100% this game on stream, because it might, like, actually take a while to do. Or it might pace the game out, like, perfectly for 2 streams. Because I absolutely was motivated to 100% the first game, which is especially high praise for me when it comes to a game that has, like, a lot of little things to collect in the levels. Because there are a lot of games that make that kind of thing pretty ignorable. Or I'm just like, ah, doodads, okay, I will just continue on because I'm not motivated enough with this game. When it comes to, like, 100%ing games, I think a lot of it for me is mostly just, like, how good of a job does the game do at making going through the stages and 100%ing the stages, like, basically feel like 2 different games. But yeah, combing over a level just has, like, such a different feel that I'm like, is it fun to comb over a level? Then I would love to do that, if that's something you've got baked into the game. I really, really, really like that this game has both the collectibles, like, kind of 3 different goals with each stage. Getting through the stage, which is simple enough, especially, you know, you can comb through them a bunch, or you can just kind of blitz to the end, or somewhere in between. But ultimately, I want to go back and collect everything, so combing everything over from top to bottom is kind of the second way to play through them. And then the third way is the time trials that basically feel like a totally different game. Yeah, woo! See, like, that kind of, like, intentionally picking up a ton of speed is something you almost don't want to do when you're, like, meticulously looking through the stage. So it almost feels like a new mechanic when you're intentionally trying to run through them. Not literally a mechanic exclusive to this mode, but a mechanic that feels way cooler in this mode. Oh, yep. Cool. Okay, so you just unlock a bunch of grappling hooks as the game goes on. That's sick. I honestly love when games do that with collectibles. I feel like one of my favorite collectibles in any game ever is like the, what is it? The Kirby Squeak Squad, I believe it was, where you can find like spray paints in the stages. And it is like just so much fun to find a new color to mess around with, even though it doesn't like change anything. Back when video games weren't evil about cosmetics. It's been a pretty quiet night as far as the stream itself goes. But that's also pretty understandable, because I'm streaming at a super weird time of the week and also of the day. Where I think a shocking amount of my followers are from overseas. Overseas followers are the best? Yeah. I mostly just feel bad. And, you know, when it comes to scheduling stuff, because, like, this is, like, semi-late, but pretty normal for people in our time zone, but, like, suck and is impossible for people who are in, you know, any kind of overseas time zone. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I have a guy in Norway, like, bro, it's 2 a.m. Why are we watching me? Yeah, no, I have to assume, unfortunately, to some extent, that if anybody, you know, unless they have a job that makes it, like, pretty impossible, that a lot of people in the UK, and, like, you know, generally, like, those time zones, you know, I think just kind of have to accept that a lot of the internet is from the US, and that they're gonna have to deal with a shitty sleep schedule if they want to interact with a lot of, whether it's streamers or their own online friends that are from the US. And they're just like, sigh, yeah, I do have to stay up until 2 a.m. if I want to hang out with you or see you literally at all. I've definitely gotten that sentiment directly from at least 1 or 2 people. There are definitely a lot of games that I've ended up playing just because I happen to find the soundtrack by one way or another. Speaking of actually the Jet Set Radio stuff, that's definitely the reason that I ended up getting around to a game like that. I don't know if I would have thought to play the, the skating game if it wasn't for the fact that it had just such a good energy about the entire game. Especially the music. I know Devil May Cry is another one, where I want to say I first heard like Dante's theme in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and could not stop listening to it, and then I was like, oh, I should get the soundtrack for the other games. And then 15 years later, and it's like one of my favorite franchises of all time. Every time I have a moment like that, though, I'm like, you know, like whether it's crossover games or something like how I got really obsessed with Final Fantasy as a series because I played the Final Fantasy rhythm game. I'm like, god damn it, the marketing worked on me. Because it's like basically, anytime that there's any kind of like collection, you know, crossover, whatever kind of game like that, like that's like half the reason they exist. Is to be like, check out all these cool characters. Hey, if you like playing this one, or if you like something about them, they've got a whole franchise. Oh, duh, Smash Bros. I was trying to think of, like, I feel like there's another big crossover game that's probably gotten me to try a bunch of stuff. Maybe the biggest one in history that I played competitively for years. Or biggest one in gaming history, I should say. You know, honestly, maybe just the biggest one in history. I can at least very safely say that Smash got me thinking much more about Pac-Man as a franchise. Maybe Kirby too, but I was definitely, you know, before I played Meta Knight, a Kirby character in that game, I was already a pretty big fan of the Kirby games. One of my, like, core memories of playing Resident Evil 4. So I, like, grew up around a lot of people that played Resident Evil 4. This is such, like, a story-heavy game, I don't want to talk over everything. I grew up around Resident Evil 4 a lot, but I was always too much of a baby to actually play horror games myself. I tried starting it once and got, like, way too scared when the first enemies showed up, but I eventually kind of got over myself, at least to an extent, with horror games, where I started to feel a lot more comfortable with them. Started with stuff like Yume Nikki, eventually played Resident Evil. Did I play 4 first? I forget if I played Resident Evil 4 first or if I played 1 remake, but I'm pretty sure I played 4. And I don't know. It was a very cool experience for me because it was kind of like getting some very dense nostalgia for a game that I grew up with like a decade before because so much of my friends played it, while at the same time playing one of the best games I've ever played in my life, because it does actually just kind of live up to the hype of being one of the best games of all time. And I don't know. It's probably just one of my most like pleasant across the board gaming experiences because of that. I also played it like around Halloween when I played it for the first time. And not that this is super related, but it was around when they were still releasing Game Fuel regularly every year, which is like a super nostalgic drink for me, where that's like the Mountain Dew Game Fuel. They used to release it around October every year. I think they're starting to do it again. I think it's going to come back this year, but it was gone for a while. And you know, it originally came out around the same time that like my friends were playing Resident Evil 4, and they were still releasing it for a little while after that, including when I played Resident Evil 4 myself. So it was like cold autumn, super nostalgic game, super nostalgic drink, horror game with a lot of good atmosphere, extremely good game across the board. It was just a good time. It makes me want to reread the House of Leaves. I still should at some point, although I just haven't read a book in a hot second. I should probably do that, period. So making a House of Leaves wouldn't be a bad idea. It is funny to think back on, though, that I'm pretty sure, not that literally everything that I did was, like, not everything I read was, like, literally just because it was tied to a video game. But there was at least some things that were. Like, I definitely read Dante's Inferno.
A lunchbox again.
Because I was curious just how, if on any level, the Devil May Cry series actually pulled from it, outside of pulling a handful of the names. And that was just kind of some neat culture to get regardless. And the way more interesting one that I read was the book that Mother 3 is based on. Or not based on, but like heavily inspired by, including like the main characters having the same name, is a super fucked up book. A high recommendation, especially if you're a fan of Mother 3, but it is very heavy and weird. A lot of, instead of, you know, how Mother 3 is just a very like floaty, surrealist game that still tackles heavy subjects. The book, which I think it's called like The Notebook, The Truth, The Third Lie, is like technically 3 books, and obviously not that notebook. But it's like a much more grounded, like in the middle of wartime story. Like a couple of kids kind of growing up in it in like really fucked up circumstances. The other thing I kicked off on a little bit around that time was, there was like a short period of time where I was like really getting into mouse-related media, to the point where I'm shocked that I didn't end up making a mouse persona instead of a squirrel. Just as far as things like Mouse Guard was the thing that really kicked it off. And then, which is a graphic novel, not like a book. But then that kind of led me into being curious about what Redwall was. Eventually I learned more about Redwall. And at least read, I think, the first 2 books and watched some of the cartoon series for it. And then I also read the book and finally watched the movie for Secret of Nim.